Hi, my name is Dan Linzell. I'm the chair of the Civil Engineering Department at the University of Nebraska, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about myself, but mainly to tell you about the field of civil engineering, what we have to offer here at the University of Nebraska for students that are interested in going into civil engineering, what our expectations are in relation to your performance as a student here, some career opportunities that would be available should you get a degree in civil engineering, opportunities you have while at UNL for involvement in organizations that are affiliated with civil engineering, and one unique aspect in relation to attending UNL to become a civil engineer. So first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I have been at the University of Nebraska for almost a year. I became chair in July of 2013. Prior to being at Nebraska, I was at Penn State University for 14 years as a faculty member. Before being at Penn State, I was a graduate student at Georgia Tech. And prior to Georgia Tech, I worked in consulting for about 4 years after receiving my bachelor's degree from the Ohio State University. So I'm a Big Ten guy. I'm excited to be here at Nebraska, and I think there's a lot of good things that our program offers you in relation to receiving a degree in civil engineering. So a little bit of personal information about me. I'm happily married, have two wonderful daughters. My older daughter is a sophomore in high school, loves to swim. My younger daughter is in 6th grade, and a recent science project that she did with a friend of hers focused on civil engineering. So I may have a future engineer in my family. My interests run the gamut of activities mostly centered around water, but I also still think I can play basketball and try to do it on a regular basis. Let me tell you a little bit about my research background. It also kind of dovetails into my teaching interests and areas. From a research perspective, I'm a structural engineer. So my research focuses on civil infrastructure, and there's really two main focus areas that my research group has spent their time looking into over the years. The first area is largely centered around health monitoring of our infrastructure, and more specifically, bridges that aren't straight. So a lot of the work that my graduate students do focuses on how bridges that are curved or skewed in plan, structures that aren't straight, behave primarily during construction, but also once they're in service. So we're out there basically taking the temperature of these bridges, seeing what their health is, and determining if things need to be done to make sure that they can be constructed more efficiently and more accurately, and also to make sure that they can last longer. The other area that my research group focuses in is related to resiliency of our infrastructure system. Resiliency mainly refers to the robustness of infrastructure, the ability of infrastructure to last as long as possible and resist adverse events. So the work that my group has been doing in relation to structural or infrastructure resiliency looks at the response of structural components and systems to large loads, predominantly from blasts and impact. So I have had students and continue to have students that look at the behavior of various structures that are put in place to either prevent vehicular impact into a structural system, prevent purposeful blasts in and around a structural system, and if a blast does occur, hardening a structural system to resist that type of extreme loading event. So that's a little bit about me. The main focus of this discussion relates to civil engineering and what the field is, what UNL can offer you should you choose to go into civil engineering, and what the benefits are in relation to receiving a civil engineering degree and receiving a civil engineering degree from the University of Nebraska. So I'm going to give you a little quiz, and I'll provide answers to that quiz later on during this presentation. So this is a photograph of the buildings within which the Civil Engineering Department is located in Lincoln. And what I want you to do is to look at the picture and try to identify an object on this picture that involves a civil engineer specializing in one of these 5 areas. I'm going to explain to you what these 5 areas are as they relate to our department in a minute, That'll give you some information that you can then use to point out in this picture things that relate to each of these 5 areas within civil engineering. So I'll get back to this at the end of the presentation. So, a formal definition of civil engineering. I showed you a picture of Lincoln, Nebraska that gave you some idea of what civil engineers deal with and what we do. So what's a formal definition? Here's a formal definition. This is basically the first definition of a civil engineer. A civil engineer is a builder of systems to meet basic community needs of the civilian population. The builder of systems to meet basic community needs of a civilian population. Notice civil is underlined here. Civil engineers, we work for the population, and we deal with things that the population uses on a regular basis. And also notice the term builder. So we deal with, as I stated before, everything that you travel on, travel under, go in and out of, and drink and breathe, really, in our profession. So we are really the creators of infrastructure. That's what we do. So in the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Nebraska, we have, as I alluded to before, 5 areas of study. So I'll list what those areas are, and I'll talk about what each of those areas means and try to relate interests to each of them. So maybe you can make a decision if you're interested in going into civil engineering in relation to what area you want to focus on. So these are our 5 areas: environmental, geotechnical and materials, structural, transportation, and water resources. Each of those areas focuses on different aspects in relation to our infrastructure, because remember, we are the builders of infrastructure. So let's talk about each of them. Let's talk about environmental engineering. What do you do? If you get a degree in civil engineering with a focus in environmental engineering, these are some of the things you would deal with: handling air pollution, hazardous waste treatment, water supply, water management, solid waste disposal. So this is where civil engineers deal with what we breathe, what we drink, and really also what we eat. So if you have an interest in chemistry, you follow public health issues, you're concerned about pollution of the air, of the water, of the soil, because if the soil is polluted, that affects the food that we eat, you might be interested in environmental engineering. Let's move to geotechnical engineering and materials. People that focus in geotechnical engineering and materials and receive a civil engineering degree from the University of Nebraska deal with materials used to build the infrastructure, such as concrete, pavements. They deal with foundation design. They deal with soils. Soils are what hold everything up. They deal with site studies. What is the best location for a certain piece of our infrastructure? So you may be interested in going into geotechnical and materials engineering if you like geology, you like going outside, you like working in laboratories, and you're interested in the building blocks of our infrastructure, the elements that build civil infrastructure. Let's talk about structural engineering. This is the field that I pursued, and the work that I do relates to the work that I do in civil engineering. So if you're interested in making things stand up, looking at how buildings are built, how towers and columns are built, how large dams are constructed, how bridges are designed and constructed, structural engineering may be the focus area that would interest you within civil engineering. So if you have an interest in physics again, you like mathematics, you like working in computers, you think you can think in 3 dimensions to determine how things fit together and how they should best be proportioned to resist loads that are put on them, structural engineering may be the area of interest for you within civil engineering. Let's talk about transportation. Transportation engineers in civil engineering deal with laying out roadways, designing airports, designing port facilities, which can include airports and ports for ships, traffic control, how do you best mark pavements and best design signs. They also deal with what are known as intelligent transportation systems. So signs that come on when you travel down the freeway, that's an intelligent transportation system. It's determining who you are and where you are on the road and providing information accordingly. So you might be interested in going into transportation engineering if you like working with people, you like mathematics and computer simulations. Again, you can think in 3D, and you're concerned about traffic congestion. Because if any of you have been in a large city such as Omaha or Kansas City, you know that traffic congestion is a concern. And finally, let's talk about water resources. It is the final area of the 5 in civil engineering at the University of Nebraska that you could focus on if you so chose. Water resources engineers deal with storm sewers, planning for water resources so that there is enough water when there is a drought, designing dams, designing irrigation systems, water distribution systems, modeling where the groundwater goes, which is important in Nebraska. So if you have an interest in working with models again, you like mathematics, you like being outside, and you like to harness the power of water, maybe water resources engineering is the area that you would like to go into in civil engineering. So that ends my discussion of the 5 areas that you could focus on if you so choose once coming to the University of Nebraska and focusing on civil engineering. Well, what does that mean for you? If you get a degree in civil engineering at the University of Nebraska, where could you go? You can work both in private industry and for the government, for the public. So examples of private industry consulting organizations that you could go to work for and that our grads have gone to work for are HDR and Olson Associates. Those are both large consulting firms, one headquartered in Omaha, one headquartered in Lincoln, that deal with designing and constructing our infrastructure. If you want to go to work for the government, you can be hired by city, state, and federal government agencies to do work in relation to civil engineering. Project management, project implementation, design checking, construction management, both pre and post construction, determining the service life of certain infrastructure components, things like that. And you can see that our graduates have been hired by both city public works departments as well as Nebraska agencies such as the Nebraska Department of Roads, and also federal agencies such as the Federal Highway Administration and the EPA. If you want to go into other industry organizations, a lot of our graduates are hired by producers of civil infrastructure components, such as Wilson Concrete, who produces concrete components used for infrastructure designs. Valmont produces lighting instruments, power poles, light standards, things like that. You can go to work for Peter Kiewit, who's headquartered in Omaha as well. Peter Kiewit is one of the largest heavy construction firms in the world. Bechtel is an extremely large design and construction firm, and the list goes on and on. So there are many opportunities for graduates that obtain a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree in civil engineering. So what activities can you get involved with as a student in civil engineering at the University of Nebraska? We have a number of student groups that are very active at UNL. One of our biggest student organizations is our American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE student chapter. And we have a student chapter in Lincoln and also in Omaha. Those student chapters do a lot of great things in relation to bringing in speakers, offering opportunities for students to get together, to socialize, talk about career opportunities. But some of the biggest activities that occur on a regular basis are in affiliation with our regional and national concrete canoe and steel bridge competitions. Believe it or not, you can build a canoe out of concrete, and students do that on both campuses, and you can make it float and you can race. And that's one of the most popular activities that we have. We also have student teams on both campuses that design, fabricate, and construct scale model steel bridges to some very stringent, in association with some very stringent rules. We have other organizations that are very active as well. We have a student chapter of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, should you be interested in transportation engineering. If you're interested in water resources engineering and environmental engineering, we have an active American Water Works Association and Water Environmental Forum student chapter. We have an active student honorary chapter, Chi Epsilon. That's for students that are high performers in civil engineering. We have a very active Engineers Without Borders chapter. That's a College of Engineering student group. And the advisors for that student group are both civil engineering faculty. And in fact, our advisor for last year, Dr. Libby Jones, was just named National Advisor of the Year for EWB USA. That group is very active overseas in Madagascar, basically addressing a number of basic problems that occur in various remote villages in Madagascar, providing clean water, providing adequate sanitation facilities, providing adequate schools for students to go learn, and that student chapter is doing a wonderful, wonderful job and involves a lot of civil engineers. We also have various internship opportunities. One example is our Partners in Pollution Prevention group, which allows you, again, if you're interested in water resources and or environmental engineering, to get involved with internships that deal with cleaning up the air and the water. And finally, there are internships available through our Nebraska Transportation Center that relate to areas of our field that deal with transportation infrastructure. So materials, students that are interested in materials and geotech, students that are interested in structural engineering, students that are interested in transportation engineering can find internship opportunities that relate to research and that relate to teaching others about civil engineering. So back to the quiz that I offered to you a while ago. So again, the objective was for you to find at least one object in the picture that involves a civil engineer specializing in each of the areas that I've talked about. So I'm going to go through the answers here. So hopefully you have some ideas. Again, in this picture, there's something that is shown that relates to each of those areas. So why don't we go through the answers here. First of all, in relation to water resources engineering, the storm sewers that are shown deal with groundwater, surface water, and how you get rid of it. So that's water resources engineering. Let's talk about transportation engineering. Really, there's many examples in relation to transportation engineering. The streets and the sidewalks themselves are modes, offer modes of transportation opportunities. There is a traffic signal, so as a transportation engineer, you could deal with timing those signals, and also the markings on the pavement deal with transportation engineering and conveying to the drivers how they're supposed to get around, and the pedestrians. Structural engineering, that was probably the easiest one. You can point to the building, you can point to the column, you can point to many, many different things and say that's a structure. So structural engineering is obviously shown. Materials and geotech. Anything that is sitting on or embedded in the earth can be considered something that's dealing with geotechnical engineering, and any of the materials that are used to construct really anything shown here can be materials engineering as it relates to civil infrastructure. So what are we missing? We've got water resources covered, we've got geotech and materials covered, we've got structural engineering covered, we've got transportation engineering covered. Well, where would environmental engineering go? You could say the storm sewers, certainly, but there's one other object in this picture that could relate to environmental engineering, and that's the trash can, the solid waste disposal device. So hopefully you had fun with that. So I just want to end this conversation by discussing one unique aspect that I alluded to a little bit during this presentation, but I never really quite pointed it out as it relates to receiving a civil engineering degree from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We are one department located in two places. We're located both in Lincoln, and the upper left-hand photo is, again, of the buildings that we're housed in Lincoln, but we're also located in Omaha at the Peter Keywood Institute. So you have options, and you will receive a high-quality education irrespective of which campus you attend, and by offering the same program in two places, that really expands the courses that you can take, especially at the upper levels. When you become a senior, you may be able to take classes in relation to your particular area and have more opportunities in relation to the topics that those classes will cover. So again, my name is Dan Linzell. I'm the Chair of Civil Engineering, and I hope that this short little snippet in relation to what civil engineers do and what the University of Nebraska can offer, should you choose to go into civil engineering, was beneficial. Thank you.